Mr. Robert Fairchild has a very unusual life. His rites of passage from boyhood to manhood did not occur in the bosom of his family because something happened that took him away from his loving mother. His father died in 1916 when he was 11 years old, and he was the oldest of 6 children. His mother couldn't keep them together and had to put them in the Deaf, Blind, and Orphan Institute for Black Children in Taft. And that is where he endured some traumatic things, but his strong religious faith helped him to survive. And we're sitting in Vernon Ame Church. Mr. Fairchild has been a member of this church since he was 9 years old. And this is just a fascinating story of the role of religion in a black youth's life and how it paved the way for his whole rich life. Mr. Fairchild, just tell us your story.
As indicated, I have been a member of the church. When I was a little boy, growing up in the church, my mother would read the Bible to us. And she had one of those big Bibles with stories about Daniel and the lion's den and the 3 Hebrew children, David and Goliath, and so on down to this. And I thought they were the most fascinating stories I had ever heard. Well, I continued to go to school. I would attend church, Sunday school, and then I was singing in the youth choir. And then I graduated, went to high school, and while I was in high school, I was appointed a trustee of Vernon Ame Church, and also a teacher of Sunday school at that time. Then I graduated from high school January 1925, Booker T. Washington High School, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I wanted, for some unexplained reason, I had always had a desire to have an education. I never have understood that. And every time my mother would try to keep me out, I would slip off and go to school. But anyway, we had a young man to graduate from Booker Washington High School in 1924. His name was Lord Williams. He went to Nebraska to study pharmacy. And he came back and we talked, and I asked him how was it, and he said, oh, it's wonderful. He said, a Negro can have he got all kinds of economic opportunities to work his way through college. I said, well, that's where I'm going. I first decided to be a lawyer, and I talked it over with my mother, and she said, no, don't be a lawyer, they tell lies. Well, my uncle that I was named after, Robert Fairchild, in Ellery, Arkansas, had written me a letter and had sent me an article from the Chicago Defender telling about Bingham State Bank on 36th State Street. And I said, well, I know what I'll do. I'll be a businessman. And I will major in business and banking. Well, so I wrote a letter to the registrar and got the necessary information. I found out how much money I needed. And so I first had given my money to a teacher to save. And when I asked him how much money did I have, he said, you don't have anything. All the money that you have given me was for your board. See, I used to stay with him after my mother and my stepfather kicked me out. So Mrs. Ferguson, who operated Ferguson Drugstore, said, I tell you what you do. I told her about it. She said, well, I tell you what you do. From now on, bring all your extra money down here, and I will take care of it. And so when time come for me to go to college, I had close to $100. At that time, expenses were cheap. Transportation on railroads was cheap. Entrances into the University of Nebraska was cheap. So I had enough to pay for my tuition, buy my books, and I put $5 in the bank, pay my room rent. But when I got ready to go, that night we gathered down at the drugstore, and two teachers came in. One was named Horace Hughes, and the other was named Stephen Williams. Where are you going, Bob? I said, I'm going to college. I'm going to Nebraska. And they said, you'll never make it. So I went on. While I was living with Horace Hughes and Seymour Williams too, and both of them lived together on Elgin. Seymour Williams had a mother-in-law who didn't have much education, but oh, the mother which she had was just beautiful. And she and I, when I first moved over there, she resented it. And finally she discovered that I had something good in me, and she put her arms around me and began to teach me. She taught me the importance of taking a bath. She taught me the importance of getting an education. She taught me the importance of sleeping in pajamas rather than underwear. She taught me many things. And we became very, very close. And she would say to me, whatever you do, when you get there, stay there. Don't you leave. Unfortunately, she said one thing that I have always understood. She said, don't bother with the Negroes. Seek all the help from the white man, because the Negro won't help you. I found it to be true. The Negro wanted to exploit me and misuse me. So I went on to Nebraska. I enrolled. By the way, I didn't register as a resident from Oklahoma because you had an out-of-state fee to pay. I registered as a student from Omaha, Nebraska. And I had an aunt who lived there, and I used her address. So, before I left, so my mother came down, and she said to me at the drugstore, Bob, I don't have any money to give you, but when you get to Nebraska, stay on your knees. If you do, you'll make it. And I took her at her word. I did everything under the sun that was required of me. Well, the first job I had was shining shoes in a barbershop, a ladies' barbershop. And then there was a Negro who had a barbershop with 11 barbers. And he said, Bob, I need some help. He belonged to my church, the church I attended. And he said, Bob, I need some help. Will you come over and work for me? And I said, yes, I'd be glad to. So I went over and began to work for him. And I made more money, and I was able to pay my bills. I made friends with the advisor at the university, Dr. Fulbrook. And I talked to him, and I let him know how important it was for me to get an education, and that I was there by myself. And so he put his arms around me and began to steer me to different people to work for them, and to, not frequently, just intermittently. For example, in the wintertime, they put up what is called storm windows. And in the spring, we take them down and wash the storm windows, and wash the windows of the house, and then wax the floors of the house, polish and do other things. That would happen once or twice a year. I had two families that I went to. One name was Gerard. I don't remember the other one's name. But finally, the professor said to me, my advisor said to me, Bob, says, why don't you go and, how would you like to work for the fraternity? I said, I wouldn't mind it. He said, well, it's nothing but just a job of waiting table and cleaning up the bathroom. And I said, that'd be fine. He said, well, why don't you go and make application? So I went and made application to work. And I did. They hired me. And I waited table on this men in the fraternity of Sigma Nu. And they wouldn't eat leftovers, so all the food that they had left over, they would, the chef, who was colored, and his wife, they would give it to me. And I'd call in the students, the colored students, and say, look, I got some food, come over. And Reverend Hill was one of the students. And there are others who came and they ate, and I kept them fed most of the time. Well, finally, the man's name who was the cook and his wife, his name was Pace, P-A-C-E. And he said to me, he said, Bob says, you can make more money at waiting table on the dining car. And why don't you apply? I said, well, what are some of the railroads? He said, well, there's the Burlington, there's the Sioux Line, there's the Great Northern, and there's the Northern Pacific, and there's one more, I can't recall the name of it anyway. So having majored in business administration, I had been taught how to write letters. So I wrote a letter of application. I knew to make it short, and I did it, and asking that I be considered employment. And I got a reply from each one of the railroads, all five of them said, come on. So I decided to go to St. Paul, Minnesota, and work on the Great Northern. A rather interesting experience took place. When I filled out the application for the job and carried it to the sign-out man, and he looked at it, and all he did was turn over there where it says experience, and I had none. He threw it in the wastebasket. And I said, Mr. Dean, I said, please give me a chance. I'm trying to work my way through college. I'm a good worker. I'm honest. And I will be on time. Please give me a job. He said, all right, I'll do that. So they put me on a run to Winnipeg, Canada. And I stayed over there 7 days. They said, you're good enough to be on the main line. And they put me on the main line. There I stayed for 4 years. That was in 1928. The first year I worked, I made close to $700. Oh, that was a lot of money then. And so I worked. And I came into contact with some rough people. Rough. I mean, they were brutal. But I stayed. One man who was steward said to me, he was very unkind to me, and he rode me morning, noon, and night. And so I said, there must be some way that I can get him off my back. So I would get up in the morning at 3 o'clock and go down and clean up the dining room, set it up, and then go back to sleep until the waiters came. And when I got ready to come, he said, I'm saying you graduated from college and this is your last trip. And I said, that's right. He said, well, I want you to know, I don't care what the circumstances or the conditions are, you will make it because you got what it takes. In the meantime, though, I come back to Lincoln and I pursue my education, and I'm still going to church. And one night I was feeling very, very depressed. So I decided to sing one of the church songs. I don't remember now which one it was, but it might have been Just a Closer Walk with Thee. But anyway, I began to sing. Then all at once, I began to cry, just like a baby. And finally, I got over my crying spell, and I said, Lord, I don't understand it. I said, I go to church on a Sunday morning and night. I teach Sunday school. I'm a member of the trustee board. And I said, what a lurch of substance I have, I even share that with you. And yet you let these people mistreat me as if you don't know a thing in the world about me. And he said, so I said, well, you must have a reason for doing it. And I accepted. And I promise you, if and when I graduate from college or the university, all the time that I have left after earning a living, I'm going to devote it to helping young people so they won't have as hard a time that I'm having now. And that was my ambition. I'm still going to church, still participating in the Sunday school program, church activities. My mother, Vernon, has never been a church that had a whole lot of money. And they had to rely on selling dinners, suppers, and other events, recitals of different people to raise funds. We haven't had any oil magnates or businessmen to leave Vernon $100,000, $50. We've had to scrape to get it. It was a difficult time, and my mother was very, very instrumental in providing support for these various activities. One time we had a debt indebtedness of the church of $10,000, and the preacher said, we're going to pay this debt in 6 months, and I want everybody to make a contribution. My mother worked at the post office. She didn't make much money. But she would go to the loan office, loan shark, and borrow money in order to put her $100 in. In other words, she set the example for me. By the way, I forgot to tell you that when my father died, we didn't have hospitals like we have now. He called me to the bedside and said, son, I'm going to leave you. And there are 2 things that I want you to learn how to do. Pay your debts, say your prayers. And I've done it. I graduated in 1931, June the 6th. 6 Negroes were in the class. The total population, I think, was 965 or 70 of graduation from the University of Nebraska. By the way, Nebraska at that time ranked 6th in the nation scholastically. So I was very proud of my graduation. And I came back home, and instead of the people accepting me, they rejected me. And they met me on the street one day and they said, you got your goddamn degree, but you ain't gonna get no job and you come by us. So from 1931 until 1936, I did menial jobs to make a living. Only through politics was I able to rise above them. When I graduated from Brook Washington High School, I had 3 goals in life I wanted to attain. 1 was to learn how to work and do it well. 2, learn how to enjoy life. 3, learn how to think. And in 1938, I added a 4th one, that was how to be a Christian. And in 1954, I added a 5th one, that was how to get along with me. And so, I have spent a great part of my life trying to understand who I am. I had a problem. I knew I had a problem when I went to Nebraska. Now, every Sunday around 4 o'clock, I'd go down to the library and read books on sociology and psychology and social psychology and abnormal psychology and criminology and everything that I could, but I couldn't find the answer to what it was. And how I became involved in being a Christian. I always belonged to the church. I always was. And I thought because I had that degree that was it. I didn't need God. And my mother said to me, Bob, I believe if you went and talked to Reverend Jennings, he would help you overcome your problem of economics. And I said, oh, Mama, I ain't thinking about that bird. He ain't nothing but a fake. At that time, he had the philosophy of putting his hands on you and healing you. And every Monday, I was off. I was waiting table at Oaks Country Club. And I'd go by and sit down and talk to Mama for hours. And she'd always say at the end, Bob, if I was you, I'd go and talk with Reverend Jennings. And so finally one day, after about 6 or 8 weeks, I was walking down Greenwood, coming south on Greenwood. I got to where King Street is now. And I was thinking about all the things that Mama and I had talked about. And this part of the conversation came up. And a small voice said to me, why don't you go and talk to Reverend Jennings? You can't lose anything, and you might gain something. He knew me. I'm a trustee. I teach Sunday school whenever I could. And I called him up. What you want, Bob? I said, I need to talk with you. I knew you was going to come, but I didn't know when. That's what he said to me. So I said, he said, when can you come? I said, I can't come until next Monday. Okay. 10 o'clock. No, make it 11. All right, I'll make it 11. So I went in and told him how the Negroes had ganged up on me and how every time somebody wanted to hire me for a job, wasn't a job available, but teaching, they would step in and say, don't give it a job. And finally, when I finished, about 20 minutes later, he said, Bob, you know what your trouble is? I said, no, I don't. He said, you think because you got that degree from the University of Nebraska, you can do anything you want without God? I said, but you can't. So now this is what I want you to do. I want you to go and say your prayers. And this is what I want you to say. Nothing more, nothing less. Lord, I have messed up my life. From now on, you take over. And he said, if you do that, and you are sincere, he said, you won't be working at Oaks Country Club 30 days from now, you'll be gone to a better job. And it was 20 days. I got a job working for the city at the park program at King Street Park. And that fall, I got a job teaching school down in Bigwood. And the principal didn't want me. He was black, but the superintendent did, and that made the difference. So I stayed there, and I later became acquainted with, I'll go back just a little bit. In order for me to get this recognition or these jobs, I had to play politics. And that, in those days, the Negro didn't play politics very well. And therefore, whenever they did it, they would always ask the candidate for money. handout. So I had a loan with the loan shark, and he was very friendly, very friendly. His name was Leroy Thomas, incidentally. And he said, I said to him one day, do you know any politicians? He said, yeah, 2 or 3. I said, would you be willing to introduce me to 1 or 2 of them? Well, what you got on your mind? I said, well, I'm working for the Southwestern Bell Telephone Company, washing cars. And I said, I started out at $13 a week. And they had raised me to $15. And I was married and had a little boy. And I said, the man came in and told me, this is as far as you can go. And I said, well, if that's as far as I can go, then my goose is cooked. Will you give me some help? Will you introduce me to one of your friends? Maybe I can convince him that I am worthy of his consideration. He said, well, I'll be glad to. So he arranged for me to meet a common pleas judge, that's the lower court judge. His name was Bert Johnson. He was a member of a large family, lived on 31st and South Louis. At that time it was a farm out there. This is back in the 30s. And I went in and I said, now I met him, and he said, well, Barbara says, I have 4 jobs. I have to give them to white people. I said, okay. I said, all I want to do is to cultivate your friendship. He said, okay. So when I left, when Thomas and I left, I was walking after Mr. Thomas left me at the corner of 5th and Boulder to go to do something, and I came on home. And I said, now how am I going to convince him that I'm worthy of his consideration? And so I decided to tell him my life history. And I went back as far as I could to tell him about experiences that I had had. And then I told him, after that, I told him my ambition. And one day, I was sitting there in his office talking to, oh yeah, I ran out of things to tell him about my life. So I decided to tell him the current event. He says, it's a good thing you do come and tell me what's going on, because I don't have a chance to read the newspaper. So one day I was sitting there in his office talking to him and said, come on, I want you to meet my friend. He carried me over to the courthouse. We met everybody, the judges, the district attorneys, and the sheriff, and the educators. And I got my first job teaching school at El Suma, which is another Negro community. But a little bit later on, a campaign came up for United States Senate. And Josh Lee was a member of the House of Representatives. He taught speech at Oklahoma University. He was a very good orator. And so this Bert Johnson told me that he was going to run for Senate. And I said, well, I want to work for him. And so I wrote him a letter. And I didn't hear anything from him for quite a while. Finally, I told Bert Johnson, he said, don't worry, I said, he's busy. I said, okay. But the thing that sold me on Josh Lee was he delivered the memorial address for Will Rogers. You see, when Will Rogers and Wilder Post got killed in the airplane wreck, California claimed Will Rogers. And so they provided a place to bury him. And Oklahoma raised up and said, oh, no, he belongs here in Oklahoma. And so Claremore, they decided, the legislature decided that they set up a memorial in Claremore near where he was born. And he delivered the memorial address. But in his presentation, he said this. He gave the philosophy of the Republican Party, and that was there for the rich people. And that the Democrats were for the poor people, for the disadvantaged. And he said the philosophy of the Democratic Party is, there shall not be a forgotten man. And I said, because of that, I want to work for him. And I did. And he was elected. I got my first job teaching school in 1936. In 1938, I got my second job teaching school. Then in 1942, I started working for the State Health Department as an epidemiologist. All the time, I'm still going to church and attending and doing whatever I can to help. They come and ask me, Bob, will you be a patron? Yep. Bob, will you do something? Yep. And so on down the list. I've always supported Vernon. I have learned when I was working for the park department, and we was talking about this teenage program, I learned how to barbecue. And I can cook barbecue good and strong. Well, so I decided that we would barbecue chickens and bologna and sell dinners down here. And we have raised as much as $1,600. And what I would do, I would barbecue a box of chickens today, put them in the freezer. Tomorrow I barbecue another box of chicken, put it in the freezer. And the next day I barbecue another box of chicken, put them in the freezer. And then when we had the dinner, all we had to do was take them out a day or two before, and they would thaw out, and we'd serve them. And we raised money. Then all the time, I'm secretary of the worship board, the trustee board. And then all of the big wigs became vice chairman. He had more clout than I had. But never did select me. So then all of these clouts, these big wigs died. Left me. The question came, so the preacher named me the vice chairman because I'm my seniority. And then they refused to cooperate. We'd have meetings. There wouldn't be anybody there with me. And finally I decided that enough is enough. I'll let you have it. Vernon is a good church. It has been very influential in teaching me how to grow up. Not grow old. There's a difference. When you grow old, you do childish things. When you grow up, you assume the responsibilities of an adult. You pay your bills. You treat your wife with respect and dignity. You treat your neighbor as you would yourself. You vote in the elections. You don't mistreat your children. You give them the very best that you have. So I have tried with all the diligence that I know to grow up, to assume the responsibilities. I'm very pleased to say that Vernon, for the last 8 or 10 years, has been in the dumps, the garbage heap, all because the members have decided that they're not going to accept me as a part of their program. Now, this is just my opinion. I have learned from life that God made me, He made you. He made me because He loved me. And He made you because He loved you. And He wants you to love Him. one of the things that I have often told the members of my Sunday school class, do you love the Lord? They say, yes, I do. And how do you know that you love the Lord? They look at me blank. And finally I would say, there are 10 commandments. Yes. Have you obeyed them? Yes. Then you love the Lord. I had a rather interesting experience. A man asked me one time, says, I was working for the housing authority after I retired from the health department, doing recreation. And he said, if you would die tomorrow, would you go to heaven? I said, I hadn't thought about it. I said, all I've ever done is serve God because I enjoyed it. I wasn't looking for any reward. And I said, well, let's analyze. Let's see let's see if I would. And then I began to tell him about this and about that. All the things that I had done to help mankind. But I found out a little bit later that those things are not the answer. The determining factor for your knowing whether or not you will go to heaven or not is how much do you love the Lord. And I tell the Lord all the time, I thank him very much for guiding me. I thank you very much for giving me good health and strength. I thank you very much that thou hast blessed me. In 1990, I had cancer. I'm completely healed. 1993, I had a stroke. I'm almost completely healed. I'm doing fine. But the influence of the church, I remember many times I would say to the Lord, on my way to Sunday school or church, and I would say to the Lord, I wonder if I'm in touch with you. If I am, will you reveal it to me today? And I'd come to church, and it'd be something said, a song sung, or a sermon preached. They would hit me in the top of my head to the sole of my feet. Then I knew that I was in touch. Yes, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of accomplishments that I can do if I was stupid, but I will not. I have learned to love Vernon. There's not a thing that I wouldn't do. I've often wondered if I should by chance have a windfall, a large sum of money, $50,000, $25,000, $100,000, what would I do about Vernon? I have a very good friend that I talk with all the time, and I would tell him I would straighten Vernon out. He said, I would, if I was you, I'd leave him alone. Because they're not compatible to good treatment. Yes, I have learned to grow up. The most important thing for my success is not how much money I got, not how many degrees I have, but how well I get along with people. And I'm telling you, I have a good relationship with a whole lot of people, and particularly those in the lower economic status of grouping. I have passed this information on to the boys and girls of the housing project. I have told them how important it is to learn how to work and to do it well. And I've even taught them. I have carried them to the cafes, restaurants, smorgasbord, Pancake House, Hardee's, McDonald's, and treated them. And whenever we would be be sitting there waiting for them to bring the food or after they've eaten. I would say to them, is Fairchild good to you? They say, sure is. I said, well, why is it so Fairchild is so good to you? Because he's good. I said, oh no, Fairchild ain't working for him. I said, Fairchild is saying to you, I like you, and I want you to like me. If you like me, then you do some of the things I ask you to do at the center. Treat the property right. Don't destroy the games. Play cool, right. Treat your fellow man right. And learn to have fun, to enjoy life, and get an education. And it's been rewarding, tremendously rewarding. So Vernon had played its part in keeping me close to God. When I had the stroke, rather interesting, I went to the doctor for a checkup. And while I was here, I had been taking some arthritis medicine, and one of them I was allergic to, and he took me over and said, this is what's causing your problem. And he said, now come back next Tuesday and I want to make another evaluation. I said, okay. When I went back that next Tuesday, I had a stroke. Well, I went in and he examined. He said, well, I see we're improving. Then he said, I'm going to have to put you in the hospital. And the doctor came in, a lady doctor, who handles stroke patients. And she said, Mr. Fairchild, raise your hand. I raised my hand. She said, now touch your nose. And I got it down here and my hand fell. She said, you had a stroke. And then I said, a little bit later, I went on to rehabilitation and then went on home. And then one morning I was sitting up there doing my exercise and I said, Lord, I had a stroke. Now what did I do wrong this time? I examined all of the behaviors, step by step, back as far as I could remember. And I couldn't find anything that I had done that was unacceptable to God. And then I remembered the scriptures in the Bible which was talking about the time when the disciples and Jesus were walking through the country preaching. And they came upon a blind man, and one of them said to Jesus, who in this man's family has sinned that he's blind? Jesus answered, nobody. He's blind that I may do the will of my Father, which is in heaven. So I accepted it. I've done the very best that I could. No, I don't have a whole lot of money. But Lord knows I have a whole lot of wealth. I have a whole lot of knowledge. I have a whole lot of common sense. I like you very much.
Thank you. We like you too. Thank you. Thank you. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for all that you do for mankind.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Hollins was born 80 years ago in Gilmore, Texas. But when you talk to him, he tells you about Gilmore as if he were there yesterday. His memory is sharp as a tack, and he can tell you all about what it was like growing up in Texas and traveling and moving to Oklahoma in the early 40s. Mr. Hugh Hollins, tell us about your life growing up in Texas and how you learned to work and where that skill took you. Mr. Hugh Hollins.
Well, I was a farmer, and I was a pretty good farmer, is that right? And so I was, what you might say, a leader of that community with boys and stuff like that. They always took my advices and things, you know, like that. And so I was pretty good about that. And so I used to cut hair there, and when I was a kid, started at 7. And the first hair I cut my own hair. And after I got to the age of 8, I was cutting everybody's hair. And so after I got to the age of 9, I was getting styles of haircuts. And so the style that just gone out for the last 10 or 15 years, that was the style that I brought on when I was about 14. And so so I used to be a kind of what you might call a jackleg carpenter, but I didn't do any carpenting, but I could do it, but my dad wouldn't let me because I was too young. What carpenting I did it for him. And so I went to school there, and so I was pretty good, you know, in my grades and stuff, you know, like that. And so when I left home when I was about 28 years old, and I started to go in different places. And so the first place I gone to was Middlewell, Texas. And so I barbered there for about a little bit of a year. And so I left there and come to Hugo, Oklahoma. And I barbered in Hugo, Oklahoma. And while I was there, I was training boys, you know, when they come out of the Army, you know, to cut hair there in my shop. And so I left Hugo, and then I went to California. And so when I went there, I worked in the Navy about a year, 2 years. And so I left, and so I worked in the Army base. Then I was also a barber there, but I was a jackleg barber. But I made more cutting hair than I did on my job. And so when I left California, Oakland, California, I came home, and so I stayed home around about 6, 7 months. And then I thought to come to Oklahoma City. And so I barbered there about almost a year. And so I barbered there for about a year, almost a year. And so I left there and went home. And so I stayed home around about 5 or 6 months, and I thought to come here. And so I've been here ever since 46. And so, can I start, you think? No, when I decided to start, you know, barbering, you know, cutting, you know, the different cuts, you know, that I had thought about, you know, cutting. I had a brother, you know, he had pretty nice hair, and then I had a guy that was living on our farm, and he was real dark, but he had straight hair, you know, like white folks. And so I couldn't understand why the blacks didn't get their haircuts, you know, like white folks. And so I thought, you know, hair had to be straight at that time, and I wasn't over 10, 11 years old. And so, I asked my brother and asked the guy that was living on my farm there, our farm at least, I asked them, would they let me cut their hair and cut it like I wanted. I said, I'm gonna start a style here in this community. And they let me do it. And so when I cut my brother's hair, we was wearing bangs at that time. And so I cut his hair just like I saw some white people's hair was cut. And so I did it, and so I used the razor all the way around. And so I knocked the line out you in the back, you know, with the razor. And so And so after I cut his, this man that was living on our farm there, he came and I begged him to let me cut his. And he did. Now he had straight hair. And my brother, he had pretty nice hair. And so he let me cut it, and so I started cutting it. And it started spreading in the community. It took a little while, you know, for everyone to take hold to it. But they finally started wearing it. And so the boy, it spread it so wild until it finally got up around Gilman, my hometown, around those barbers up there. And so I noticed other guys were starting, guys, you know, getting their haircuts, you know, there in Gilman. I noticed they was wearing it, you know, like I was cutting it. And so they wore it like I was cutting it, you know, for a long time. And so after so long, the barbers changed it just a little bit. And let me see, hold up. Just a little bit. See, I was using the razor all the way around and then get the line out, you know, with the razor. And so the barber, he quit using the razor back there and used the clipper where it would leave a little hair in the back there where he can run the line as far down as he could get until it runs out. Then that's when they named it Long Branch. And so I was calling it box back. And so we moved that for a long time. It was different styles since that time that I had brought about, but it didn't last too long. When banged all the way across, down sideburn, that was covering his hair up, you know, his ears up. It was in the long branch style, and then I could cut it in the English style. Then I could cut it in any kind of style, maybe a single front style. And so that was the style that I brought out, you know, in the haircut line. Well, let me see, what can I start about? You know, is it all right for me to just mention, can I tell about, you know, after I got grown, what my dad did for me? Well, when we had, it was 4 boys and 3 girls. And so when one got grown, he turned the boy loose, you know, at 20 years old. And the girls, they didn't turn them loose until they got married. And so the boys, when he was 20 years old, he gave him a start. He started with a mule or anything. He had plenty of mules and horses, and he always had one, you know, ready for him when he got grown. And so when he got grown, he'd give him $40 on the mule. And to give him everything, he would give him all he made that year, and fed him, and fed the mule. That was his start. And so he done all the boys the same way, and he had he raised mules all the time. He had one that didn't never work. That's all she did. And so the oldest boy, he didn't have one when he got married. He had to buy him one. And so the girls, when they got grown and got married, he gave them $1,000, you know, and a cow. That's what he started them off with. And so the farming, he was all the boys, they was all on the farm, and then he had a lot of more people, you know, doing sharecropping on the farm, and so that's just about what I did. And so did I tell you, or did you want me to tell about
the crops? What you all planted?
Oh, well, we planted high gear. That's what we planted. Corn, peanuts, peas, and that just about all we did, you know, in that line, you know, of horses and hogs and things, you know, like that. Watermelons, and, you know, watermelons. We had big 2 peach orchards. They had a lot of peaches and everything, you know, like that. Pears and apples. No, when I can tell about when they first got married and all that kind of thing.
Barbara.
Mm-hmm. No, I came here in '46, and so I guess I was here before I got married about 8 years, and so after I lived here 8 years, I met her, and so when I met her, she was I don't know, she was, I guess, doing maid work at that time. And so after I met her, I think we went together for about 2 years. And so we finally got married. And she still was doing a little maid work at the time. No, she was working at the hospital. And so finally, we thought about, you know, getting married after we gone together for a while. And so after we got married, you know, we lived together for about 5 years. And so she wanted to and didn't want to start, you know, teaching school, but she decided she wouldn't go back to teaching. And so she finally she wanted to barber. And I didn't think too much of it. So when she mentioned that, she couldn't cut any hair, and so I decided I would. She just kept on saying that she wanted to barber, and so I told her if she had the money, you go ahead. And so she got in touch with the barber, you know, in Tyler, you know, Texas, Morgan. And so and she, I think she wrote him, yeah, she wrote him a letter, so he answered her back to come on. And so she went ahead on down there. She worked 6 months, finished, and come on back here. And so me and her worked with Reverend Morris for, well, I worked for him a long time, and she worked a little while, and she didn't want to work for him. So she quit and went up to another shop and worked for a few months. And so after Reverend Morris, you know, was in the ministry, after he went so far, you know, from Tulsa, you know, to his church, it was too far for him to come back and forth, you know, to cut hair. And so when he did that, you know, I just bought him out, bought the shop. And so my wife, after he did that, she come back to this shop. And so we cut hair there for about 6, 7 years. And so we bought another shop. And well, it was the same, it would be called Chairs, furniture, you know, like that, you know, we call that shop, but it was in the same building. And then the next move we made, that's when we bought out on 46th Street. And so we bought the business, and so we went out there, and that's where we've been ever since we retired. And so, was it any more?
So 45 years you've been barbering.
We had barbered 45 I had, and she had been barbering maybe 35.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Hollins.
Yeah.
We are now inside the Goodwin Chapelle Gallery of the Greenwood Cultural Center in North Tulsa. And it is named for Mr. E.L. Goodwin, Sr., who was publisher of the Oklahoma Eagle. Mr. Goodwin was quite a colorful character. He went to Fisk University and met his lovely wife Jean there, and they were in college in the 1920s. He was from Tulsa. His dad was a prominent Tulsa businessman who had moved here from Tennessee, and or from Mississippi, I believe. He had moved from Mississippi. And the family has always been interested in education and community. And he got interested in the Oklahoma Eagle because he was upset about an article in the Tulsa Tribune which was negative toward blacks. And his wife said, well, I'll just have to find my own blankety blank newspaper. And that's what he did. He founded the Oklahoma Eagle. It's been in their family 58 years. They've never missed a publishing date, and that's kind of interesting. They have withstood deaths in the family. They've had tragedies in their own family, the loss of a child, loss of 2 children. And they've had a tornado rip the roof off the building, and they just went over to a church and kept right on publishing, met their deadline. So Mr. Goodwin is a Tulsan, he's a deceased Tulsan who's still very much revered in the North Tulsa community. And it is fitting that this place should bear his name. The Cultural Center was built in 2 phases. Phase 1, this part that you see that houses the gallery and exhibits, rotating exhibits, was built first. And funds for this came from the community. Mrs. Thelma Whitlow and Mrs. Opal Dargan were influential in going out in the community, just raising funds to say, let's keep a memorial, let's keep our North Tulsa heritage alive. So they raised $100,000 just walking door to door, enlisting North Tulsans to preserve their own heritage. Representative Don Ross, our state legislator representing District 73, and Senator Maxine Horner, Senate District 11, have been very influential in getting state funds. And so this $1.2 million facility was built in 2 stages, this part, and then across where we're going to go in a few minutes, the Mabel Little Heritage House was the second phase of this $1.2 million building. And in this, Don Thompson, our award-winning photographer, is going to show some of the pictures in this exhibit now about the Tulsa Race Ride. And this is part of Representative Ross's exhibit called Renaissance to Ruins. And it's about Tulsa rebuilding after the race ride. So I'm going to let Mr. Thompson pan a few of these shots of the race ride, and then we're going to go across to the Mabel Little Heritage House and look at some of the furnishings and look at a house that was typical of the 1920s and 30s. This is where it was marked. Leadership qualities, various leadership ideas, but I think it means well.
I'm here to give us something to go.
Okay. What time are you leaving? When I was in Poland, on Israel, one of the men, Yeah. So I guess when those seconds are up, I guess it'll start recording.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Maybe that's the reason why I was doing it yesterday when we were
Oh.
recording yesterday, and I was just wondering if that
Sometimes.
worked.
Well, this is one of our just in case you should use the
Thank you.
telephone.
Thank you.
Well, I like that picture. It graphically displays our people.
87-year-old Mrs. Wilhelmina Howell is a typical example of Tulsa's pioneers. She moved to Tulsa from McAlester, Oklahoma when she was 3 years old. 4 years old, and her family is a pioneer family, the Guest family in early Oklahoma. One of her favorite uncles, James Guest, was a doctor in Okmulgee where I grew up and delivered most of the babies in Okmulgee. Another one of her uncles on her mother's side, Dr. A.C. Jackson of Tulsa, was, I believe, the first black to die in the race riot of 1921. And we'll hear more about this later. Mrs. Howell has much information about Tulsa in the early days. In McAlester, she said they suffered a house fire and she lost a little brother who was 3 who perished in this house fire, and then they moved to Tulsa. And she is a living legend, taught school for many years, was the favorite teacher of our photographer Don Thompson, who is doing the photographs of this project. His wife was a student of Mrs. Howell. So we're going to hear from Mrs. Howell what it was like in Oklahoma in the early days. Mrs. Howell.
Let's see, I can't talk quick.
You want the whole thing, Rita?
No,
Oh.
just your introduction.
Okay.
It's just an introduction.
Mrs. Wilhelmina Howell, Tulsa, retired school teacher and pioneer with lots of information about Oklahoma history. Mrs. Howell.
Let's see, I came to Tulsa when I was 4 years old, I believe it was. And you mentioned about the house fire in McAlester. We moved away from there. My grandmother and grandfather lived in Guthrie, Oklahoma, had just moved from Guthrie. They persuaded us to come up here to live. I lived down at 317 North Elgin Street. That's just below where the Katy, north of the Katy tracks at that time. My father was a lawyer. He had an office at first, I think down First Street when he first came to Tulsa. But then he moved on down to Archer Street later on. I had a grandfather, T.D. Jackson, who had come from Memphis, Tennessee. And he was the one who persuaded us to come up here after the McAlester disaster. And by the way, he was one of these people who, I've read in history about the Negroes who, back in pro-slavery days, who tried to be somebody. He was sort of a policeman down in Memphis. His name was T.D. Jackson, Townsend Jackson. And one night the mob came, he got a feeling that he better get out of Memphis because the white people there were getting pretty rough on us. And so they decided to move to the territory, the Indian Territory, Oklahoma, which is Oklahoma now. They moved to Guthrie, Oklahoma, and the night that they left Memphis, the mob came for him. And the next morning, one of the neighbors came and went and told my mother, who lived next door, who moved next door to a neighbor's house until he could come to the territory, Oklahoma Territory, and find housing for us, for them. And she said they lynched 7 Negroes that night, so he just escaped. And I think the reason is, I think he might have fought in that war. I don't know whether it was the Spanish-American War or which one it was. He knew some military tactics. And he tried to train the Negroes at that time how to take care of themselves, the Negro men, some little war maneuvers of this or that. And I guess they resented that, and the mob wanted him to, so he just escaped. And so she was afraid for her brother. She had 2 younger brothers, my mother did. Named one was Dr. Jackson, by the way. I have his picture there on the table. The man was, I thought he was great as a physician. In fact, he saved me. I had typhoid malaria fever when I was about 7 years old. I lived down on Elgin Street, 317 North Elgin, and he lived next door, and that man was over there. He saved me, and I appreciate that very much. But unfortunately, he was murdered during the race riot here in Tulsa. He was coming out of his house. He'd worked late that night, and they had started burning up on Detroit Street. He lived up there on Detroit Street, and they started burning, and so he had come in late off of a case. He was a house doctor, and he had a caretaker there in the house, and they said, I believe I smelled smoke. And of course the house was on fire. They were setting fire to the houses. The mob was at that time. So they came out the back door and came up the front kind of a hill like on the North Detroit Street. I believe it was the 5 or 600 block. And the white neighbors across the street said, oh, that's Dr. Jackson, don't bother him. And at that time, this mob of young boys had shotguns and they just shot into him. And we took him to Guthrie, where he had grown up after they left Memphis, Tennessee, and buried him in Guthrie, where my grandparents were buried. And that was my mother's brother. I regret it very much because, as I said, he saved me when I had typhoid malaria fever when I was young. Not only that, he was a good physician, I think. Later on, I went to, my father went to law school, and he graduated from Howard Law School, and he wanted me to go there too, but I talked to him about it. I said, he had 3 children. I was the youngest at the time. My baby brother was the youngest, but we lost him when I was 3. And when I graduated from high school, he wanted me to go to Howard because he had gone to Howard himself to law school. And I talked him out of it. I said, you can't afford it. I said, you got these other 2 children, you can't afford it. I called him Papa. I said, you can't afford it. And I talked him out of it. But later on, when I was about a sophomore, I believe it was, sophomore, junior 1, well, I did go to Howard. He made arrangements for it. And I went to Howard and finished at Howard University. And I was very proud of that because I liked Howard, and I know he was satisfied too. I got a job here in Tulsa because I had grown up in Tulsa. Mr. E.W. was the principal, called me up. First, he got me a job down in Wilhelmina, Oklahoma. I taught down there about 3 or 4 months, maybe a half a year. And he called me Guest. That was my father's name. The last name was Guest. He called up and said, Guest, I got a job for you here in Tulsa. Do you want it? I said, you know I do. So he said, well, get permission from your principal and a release. And so I came up here and I taught Tulsa about 41 years. Mm-hmm. And retired now, and I'm 87 years old at the present.
Wait, look. You ready? Mrs. Howell, family reunions are very important in the black culture, and I understand you've just had one on the McMullen side of your family. Tell me a little bit about the McMullens and the history there.
Could you reach that picture for me?
Okay.
See it over there?
Hold it up just a little bit.
My grandmother, my father's mother, was born during slavery time, and the family that the slave masters was the McMullens. And my grandmother was a very smart woman, intellectually and physically. She did things. She sewed. She could. She was really a very intelligent woman, I thought. Anyway, she took the name McMullens, and that's how the family gets the name of McMullens, because that's the family that had raised her. When she grew up, well, she married, I believe it was it a white man? I don't know. I take that back because I don't know who she married. I've forgotten. I didn't know, but I don't know who she married. But anyway, she was a guest, and yeah, she married a guest. I don't know whether the man was white or what, because some of her children look kind of light. My father was a brown-skinned man, light brown-skinned man, and she had 14 children. I think it was 7 boys and 7 girls. And my father's name was H.A. Guest. He was a lawyer here in Tulsa. I went to law school there at Howard. That's where I went to, because he kept wanting me to go to Howard because he had been there. Anyway, and then she had another boy who turned out to be a doctor. Dr. Guest down in Oklahoma. He's dead now. And he has a son here named Edgar Guest, and had another boy named Pius that's dead. And had a little girl named Zenobia, who I enjoyed very much when she used to come from Oklahoma. So that was the outcome of the McMullen family there. It was a big family. As I said, 14 children. I think 7 boys and 7 girls. Many of them lived in California after they grew up. So I think that's about it.
Okay.
This is the Mabel Little Heritage House on Greenwood in North Tulsa. It is named in honor of Mabel Little, who is now 97, I believe. And during the time of the Tulsa race riots, she was a hairdresser and had a shop, a thriving shop on Greenwood. And of course her shop, like many others, was a casualty of this race riot. It was burned to the ground, and later on she did rebuild and did reestablish her home. But she will always have this home in her honor. It is a focal point of the North Tulsa community. Events are held here, and this represents the North Tulsa Heritage Foundation, a group of Tulsa pioneers who decided to preserve as much as they could of Tulsa's rich black heritage. To the right, you will see the University Center. And right where the University Center stands is where the original Mackay House was. This house was, Mabel Little never lived in this house. This house is the second home of the Mackay family, and their home stood where the University Center stands now. Their first home was a white wooden, or either a pale green wooden dwelling. And of course it was burned to the ground during the riot. They rebuilt, the Mackays rebuilt their home, and they used brick, red brick, and the masonry, which you see here in the Heritage, the Mabel Little Heritage House. They were determined that never again would their home be burned to the ground as their original one had been during the riot. So they used this red brick. They used that fireproof masonry for the roof, and this house was restored after urban renewal started to buy property and to take over Greenwood. And Joe Robinson, a black architect in Tulsa, was in charge of the removal of the Mackay House from its original place here to the right, the University Center, to this place. He numbered every brick, he numbered every piece of masonry, and they were responsible for getting this building restored, rebuilt, intact, exactly as the second Mackay home was. And we're very proud of this in North Tulsa.
Finger up, watch my finger.
Much of the old Greenwood is now gone because of this highway construction. That is I-244 that you're looking at here. That's the Tulsa skyline behind it. And when I-244 was coming through this part of town, it took a lot of our old pioneer dwellings. And so this is what remains of the original North Tulsa, the North Greenwood area. It's still a focal point in the North Tulsa community. In fact, you can see the sign, the Bank of Oklahoma Williams sign that tells about the Greenwood Jazz Festival that's coming up the end of this week. And so it is still a focal point for the North Tulsa community. We'll walk on down and show you a little bit about what's left of Greenwood. This sign welcomes you to the Greenwood Culture Center at 322 North Greenwood Avenue in North Tulsa. And inside of that center is 100 years of African American history. The most prominent thing is a display in the Chapelle Goodwin Gallery of Representative Don Ross's photo exhibit called Greenwood Ruins to Renaissance. And this is an important exhibit that has been here over a year, and it's going to be permanently displayed here in Tulsa, and it also travels throughout the United States. And we're very proud of this center, the focal point of the North Tulsa community. During the urban renewal, the peak of the urban renewal period here in Tulsa, this Detroit Avenue, Cincinnati Avenue area was where most of the reconstruction began. I had an aunt, Cynthia Pettit Bankhead, who lived at 401 North Detroit Avenue, and her house was one of the first to go during this urban renewal. As a child, as a little girl, I used to come to Tulsa and sit on her step right there, 401 North Detroit, right where this intersection of I-244, right where the bridge is now. And I used to sit and look downtown at the panoramic view that you just saw earlier. And many Black Americans in North Tulsa lost their homes this way. And that is why we're so proud of the few remnants that we were able to keep here on Greenwood. Businesses along Greenwood. We have dry cleaners, restaurants, pool halls, barbershops, and these are some of the new buildings, some of the new entrepreneurs who have remained in the North Tulsa area. We're going to go on up, and on the left side, we're going to go on up to Williams.
When I give you a cue, go.
Sure. Start getting them out of there. She brought it back to us. You don't want to press. You have to get a chair sit next to it up.
Okay.
This is the historic Greenwood Archer area. This is the intersection of Greenwood Avenue and Archer Street. And exactly there on that corner where those buildings stand today was the Hotel Small. That was the only hotel where blacks could stay in Tulsa, the only official hotel. Black musicians who used to come and play with the local bands like Mr. Alfred Denny, Ernie Fields, they either had to stay here at the Small Hotel on that corner, or they had to stay in private homes. Most of the time they stayed in private homes with people like the Fields or like the Dennys. In 1954, as late as 1954, blacks still could not stay at the major hotels in Tulsa. In fact, Louis Armstrong, who had just made had a part in the film The Philadelphia Story with Grace Kelly, had come to Tulsa, and he stayed at the Hotel Small. The reason I know is this reviewer had just gotten married, and she and her husband were on their honeymoon at the hotel at that very spot, and I did talk to Louis Armstrong, and that was the only place, even a person as famous as Louis Armstrong, that was the only hotel where he could stay in Tulsa in 1954. We're still looking at some of the businesses in North Greenwood today. The barbershop is still a famous focal point in the community. As we heard from Mr. Hugh Hollins and his over 50 years of barbering in Tulsa, it's more than just a place to go and get your hair cut. It is a social gathering place, especially for men. And it too is a focal point in the African American community. And owned by Shirley Johnson.
And when I raise my hand, let's do that. I'll tell you later.
Blues and jazz has always been an integral part of Tulsa's history. With its proximity to Memphis, to New Orleans, to Kansas City, to St. Louis, it has always been one of the focal points for blues and jazz improvisation. And Mr. Denny, Ernie Fields, other black musicians had rich, colorful careers. Plus they had other jobs in this Greenwood area, but they made and left their name and legacy in jazz. This is the Greenwood Pharmacy, which is owned by Lloyd Williams Jr., son of Dr. Lloyd Hugh Williams, who had the original Williams drugstore on Greenwood Avenue. And he is one of our early Tulsa pioneers. I think the first black graduate of the University of Nebraska in Omaha. And he is the one who encouraged Robert Fairchild to attend the University of Nebraska. So this drugstore has its roots in North Tulsa and in the old original Williams drugstore. Just keep on doing what you do. What's your assistant's name again?
Misty.
Huh?
Misty Smith.
Misty Smith? Hi. Okay. This is Lloyd Williams, Dr. Lloyd Hume Williams Jr., son of the original founder of Williams Drugstore, the one who is featured in our memorial wall in this memory of Tulsa. Also attended the University of Nebraska for a year or so, but got his final pharmacy degree at Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas. And he is being assisted by his assistant, Misty Smith. And this is I believe it is the only drugstore in this Greenwood area. And it is very popular, has a clientele of Tulsans, especially the elderly who live in housing projects surrounding this area. And they depend on this drugstore for their medical supplies. So it is still a focal point in the North Tulsa community. Has its roots in the original Williams Drugstore, founded by his father.
See, all that was on this side of the street. We're on the same side of the street, but it's further on down.
Okay.
So this is where we are right now. That's his two-story, and that's the other building.
Well, I want you to come outside and kind of tell us that. Is it on?
It's on. Let me give you a cue, Lloyd, then you can start talking.
Well, if we look in retrospect, with 105, Williams Drugstore was at 119. Span School Law Enforcement District and all that. And of course it was next to the drugstore, the Williams Drugstore was turning in his car. Very common turning in the up on the Eagle was on the side. Down right was on this side. Also down to the Greenwood area, we had quite a bit of buildings with my father was working for Crown Goodwin, which was be comparable to a wall. This is the original spot.
Ready when I'm ready, okay?
place. Are you telling me to talk?
Mhm.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, if we look back to the Greenwood area, we can see this is where we are at this point. Williams Drugstore was right here, which kind of gives you, this band here was St. Monica's band. This is back in the 40s. If we look at this picture here, this picture is a picture of my father, who was the owner, of course, of Williams Drugstore. And this is the cosmetic counter. We carried cosmetics, and of course you can see the soda fountain. We had hair preparations, tobacco, soda fountain, prescriptions, which was a full-line drugstore. And people used to come, of course, on Sunday afternoons from churches, from First Baptist and Morning Star and Paradise, and get the soda fountain, to visit the soda fountain and talk, and it was a social gathering place for people. So it was kind of like a multi-purpose place, and that kind of gives you an idea about the way it used to be.
This is the second Vernon Ame Church. The first one was destroyed in the race riot, which we've mentioned before, the 1921 Tulsa race riot. Mr. Robert Fairchild, who's been a member of this church since he was 9 years old, this is the second Vernon Ame Church that was built. The original Vernon Ame Church was destroyed in the 1921 Tulsa race riot, which has been mentioned before. Mr. Robert Fairchild, who's been a member of this church since he was 9 years old, who's now in his 80s, says that the original structure did not have these two little domes, but that they had a single steeple with a bell. And he said that bell summoned them to Sunday school, to the church service, to funerals, to dinners on the ground, and other such events. The church has always been a focal point in the black community, and no church stands more regally than this one, Vernon Ame Church on Greenwood in North Tulsa.
When we're ready.
Okay. This is an original drawing of Dr. Lloyd Hume Williams, owner of Williams Drugstore, a landmark in this Greenwood area. And it was done in the 1950s, well, in 1950.
Go.
We're inside the Mabel Heritage House. It this home belonged to the Mackay family. And this is the second home they built. The first one that stood where the University Center of Tulsa stands today was a frame house that burned to the ground during the Tulsa race riots. They were determined to have a home that would never burn like that again. So their second home was brick, red brick, and had a masonry roof. So we're in the relocated Mackay home, which has been renamed the Mabel Little Heritage House. It's named in honor of Mabel Little, who is in her 90s now, late 90s. And she was originally a hairdresser who had a thriving business on North Greenwood during the early 1920s. It was destroyed in the race riot. So this home is named in her honor. We're now in the parlor. The parlor was a very important room in the lives of people, of all early Americans. It was for company. It was not the room where the family usually sat. It was kept always ready for company, had the very best furnishings. And this is all period furnishing. Everything in this room is of the late 1920s, early 1930s period. North Tulsans, black North Tulsans, were very frugal. They worked hard. Some of them were working class people. They worked as servants, housekeepers for the wealthy oilmen and business entrepreneurs of Tulsa. They saved their money. They bought and furnished their own homes lavishly. Some Tulsans made their living in the service industry. Others were professionals like lawyers, doctors, drugstore owners, pharmacists, and so forth. They traveled to Europe and brought back elegant furnishings, as you can see in this room. The samples of the beautiful lace curtains. These are the kind of curtains that would have come from the finest laces from Brussels, Belgium, or from Rotterdam and Amsterdam, Holland. They went over, these black Americans went over, they went over on ships like the Ile-de-France, and they brought back these elegant furnishings, or they had them shipped over. And so you will see beautiful, typical period furnishings of this era. This is my favorite piece of furniture in this room. It's called the courting bench. And in early America, it was very popular. You have the courting couple, the chaperone. And this was typical of courting days. Some of the interviewees in this project, some of the interviewees talk about courting customs in the old days, marriage, courtship, and so forth. And being chaperone was a very real part of courtship in the old days. We're now in the breakfast room of the Mackay home, and these are photographs of the original owners of this house, the Mackays. One of the signs of elegance in the early days in the United States was if you had a separate eating room, a little breakfast room separate from your dining room. And so this is the little breakfast nook. And notice the beautiful lace curtains. These cabinets are typical of that time period, the early 1900s. They were usually painted the same color as the ceiling. They are very high. Either you had to be a very tall woman or you needed a ladder to get things out of those top shelves. And this is typical. The stove and refrigerator, of course, are modern. The original stove would probably have been an old Detroit Jewel gas jet type stove. And so these are two of the modern touches. This is one of the most elegant rooms in the Mabel little heritage house. It is the dining room, and in early America, one of the signs of affluence was to have a separate dining room, and that was patterned after the European habit of having enough space to have a separate dining room. That was a sign of elegance and affluence. This furniture was purchased by the Mackays, and it has an interesting history. The sideboard the cabinet was not large enough for the housewife, so she had a carpenter build those two little extensions on the outside. So that cabinet work was done by a skilled carpenter. And that was one thing that was found about these early pioneers. They were skilled artisans in so many different things. For instance, almost all of them had second and even third occupations. Musicians like Ernie Fields or Clarence Love did other things. They were carpenters, or Mr. Alfred Denny was a cabinet maker. And some of they're noted for their music and other things, but they're also noted for their beautiful carpentry work. The Mackays had only one child, a daughter, and this was her bedroom when she was a teenager. She often had a best girlfriend spend the night and share the extra bed. One of her good classmates is a graduate of Booker T. Washington High School and was in Tulsa for a reunion, a class reunion in 1993. And during a tour of some of the early pioneers in Tulsa, some of the early black pioneers, came as early as 1889. In fact, some came earlier than that. A few came on the Trail of Tears in the 1820s, the early 1830s, with some of the tribes, some of the 5 civilized tribes that came from the Deep South. A few made it during the run of 1889, and some are shown here. We see a couple of pictures and a plaque about the all-black towns. There were 58 major all-black towns in Oklahoma, and several authors have written books about the all-black towns. E.P. Mackay was a black businessman who advocated establishing an all-black state, and it didn't bear fruitage, but he was a very popular politician, businessman at that time. Tulsa is noted for its African-American artists also. Mrs. Ira Johnson, one of our pioneers who is featured in this project, was an outstanding art teacher. She got her degree at the University of Tulsa, her master's, and studied under Alexander Hogue, the renowned Southwest artist who had a long, colorful career in Tulsa before he moved on to further west. She also taught many high school students, and several of her students have become noted authors and artists today. And one of them is Alex Corbray. And this is a picture of Corbray's. You'll notice he's covering the black family, the extended black family, the focus of the community, and it is portrayed in this picture. Another one of Mrs. Johnson's outstanding students was Felix Cole, who has work on display at the Capitol in Oklahoma City and other places. This gives a little synopsis of the race riot of 1921. There have been all kind of materials written about this riot, and books, and graduate theses, and so forth. And it's still not everything is known about it. We do know the basics, that the riot started because a black man, Dick Rowland, accidentally stepped on the foot of Eva Page, a young woman on an elevator. And we do know that the rumor got out that when he stumbled into her, she screamed, and the rumor got out that she had been assaulted, and that white men went down to the jail to get Dick Rowland to lynch him. We know those facts. What we don't know is the underlying causes that led to such a riot. And they have been brewing for years. There have been lots of jealousy, lots of race conflict. Some sources say that there was just jealousy, that Tulsa's blacks just had too much, had made too many material gains. They had too much, that black people, it was felt black people should not have such elegant homes as this, that they should not have such wealth. And the figures are varied about how many wealthy people. I've heard about black millionaires, 6, 10, 60, or even more in this Greenwood area. But there was lots of affluence. Lots of people had homes like this. And we do know that after the riot, those homes no longer existed. There were millions of dollars worth of damage, 35 blocks of family property, business, homes, and so forth destroyed. The deaths have been estimated, all kind of figures, from the 30s, 60s, hundreds, are to unknown. But we do know the majority of the deaths were blacks. And there are many, many interesting stories about this event in history. And some of these interviewees that we are doing, who are in this project, have described what this riot did to them and what effect it had on them and their families. Can you do it? The Greenwood Cultural Center, of course, could always use donations, as the major contributors to this museum, of course, was the North Tulsa Heritage Foundation. Mrs. Opal Dargan, Mrs. Thelma Whitlow, and some other pioneers raised $100,000 just going door to door and asking for support so that we could have some memorial of what North Tulsa used to be before the urban renewal. Representative Don Ross and Senator Maxine Horner were influential in lobbying at the state capitol and getting funding that contributed the main portion for financial support of this project, this complex. But we do need patrons to contribute, to continue the support of this center. And patrons who donate $100 or more get their names on plaques like these. Those who donate $500 or more get a brick outside on the front walk, a brick with their names embedded in the brick. And this represents a remembrance of the North Tulsa people. This is what they treasured, this is what they valued, this is what they wanted, as a remembrance of what Greenwood used to be, what the North Tulsa community used to be. There are many views about urban renewal. Highways are necessary, we understand that. However, the North Tulsa community feels that a disproportionate burden was placed upon them when urban renewal came through Tulsa, when highways were built through Tulsa. They feel this community suffered disproportionately. And history will bear out that in most urban renewal and building and highway construction and so forth, those people who are the least able to resist Those whose property is more vulnerable, they are the ones who usually pay the higher price. And that seems to have been true of North Tulsa. However, North Tulsa is still alive and well and flourishing, and this center is an example of that pioneer spirit that lives on in Tulsa.
Okay.
Samuel Malone Jackson and Eunice Jackson are examples of the thrifty, enterprising black entrepreneurs of Tulsa. Tulsans had to supply their own needs. The white dominant society did not meet their needs in other areas of the city, so they were forced to meet those needs, to supply those needs in their own North Tulsa community. That included everything that they needed, from the cradle to the grave. Blacks have to be enterprising and supply, mainly be the main suppliers of their needs. They were born, babies were born, delivered by black midwives, or if they lived in a large enough city, in an all-black hospital. This segregation, this separation from the main society continued right to the grave. And this is a funeral home. We are in Jackson Emory Chapel, and we're going to talk to Mrs. Jackson, who is the wife of Samuel Malone, who they have been owners of this since 1948. Actually, the funeral home had its beginning in 1917. So we're going to hear about this funeral home and the practice of blacks preparing their own for the grave. Mrs. Eunice Jackson is going to tell us about coming to Tulsa, why she came, what she found, and then we want to find out what it's like to own a funeral home. What does it involve? And we're going to go around and look and take some pictures here at the funeral home.
Well, I came here to go to school. The white people in Eufaula had cut out our school to 3 months a year. And my mother's cousin had her to come here and live where we could get 9 months of schooling. Booker T. Washington at that time had a little 4-room school on Eastern and Elgin Place. There was 4 classrooms and an office, and E.W. Woods was our principal at that time. And later on, we didn't have dances and things like the kids had in school now. We could do the Grand March, and that was the best we could do. In later years, the school was moved from Eastern and Elgin. And, well, the brick school was built after then. Then they went on out here on North, what is that, Quincy? Where's Booker T? Woodrow. And when I came out of high school, there were just 11 graduates. And do you want me to tell what you put on? And there was only one of us living now, and that's me. All of the rest of them are gone. And I am the oldest living graduate from Booker T. Washington School. Now, what else you want me to say?
Tell about the funeral home.
Oh, yeah, I met Mr. Jackson in Vernon Ame Church at that time. And
he had asked Mr. Woods, who was the principal, what about that girl, Ash? You think she'd make a good wife? He says, yeah, she'd make a good wife. You want to marry her? He said, when she gets through school, I do. He said, well, you can't beat her. So that's how I happened to meet him. And we lived on Elgin Street after we married.